last hope, refugees in hunger and fear. This story depicts the lives of people during a time of war, famine, and displacement. A village once bathed in sunlight slowly descends into chaos, fear, and sorrow. Every step becomes a struggle between survival and lost dreams. The sun spread its warm rays over the village. The sky above was clear and blue, and the fields were full of blooming flowers. Children laughed and played together, filling the air with joy. Among the old trees, birds sang, and the soft wind whispered through the leaves. At the edge of the village, the villagers went about their daily lives. Women tended the gardens and baked warm bread. Men went to the meadows, herding animals and enjoying the peaceful day. A little boy, Adil, played under a tree. His tiny hands carved a small fortress in the sand. His mother sat nearby smiling and said, "Be careful, my son, the sun is strong." The sunlight fell on their faces, painting everything in golden hues. But this peaceful day would not last. Although the sky was clear and cloudless, there was a shadow of dread over the distant mountains. News arrived at the village. War had broken out nearby and people were fleeing. At first, the villagers did not believe it. "It is far away. It will not reach us," they thought. But slowly, the sounds of battle, the cries of people, the galloping of horses, and the smell of fear and hunger seemed to drift closer. The sunny, cheerful day began to fade, replaced by an uneasy sense of sorrow and fear. The first signs came quietly. Smoke on the horizon, distant screams carried by the wind, and the hurried steps of people running past the village. Villagers peeked from behind their doors, hearts pounding. Then the soldiers arrived. Their boots thudded on the dirt roads, and their shadows stretched long in the afternoon sun. Some were armed, some carried orders, and all carried a sense of unstoppable force. Panic spread like wildfire. Families tried to hide their belongings, but the sound of breaking doors and the cries of captured neighbors filled the air. Adil clung to his mother's skirt. His small body trembled, and his wide eyes reflected the chaos around him. The golden sunlight that had kissed the village just hours before now felt cold and distant. The wind no longer whispered softly. It carried fear, grief, and the smell of burning wood. People ran toward the forests and hills, desperate to escape. Mothers called for their children. Men fought to protect them, but there was nowhere safe. Hunger and exhaustion joined the terror, leaving many unable to continue. Some fell in the dust, too weak to rise, their cries fading into the darkening sky. By nightfall, the once joyful village lay in ruins. Fires burned along the road, smoke curling into the sky. Shadows of loss and despair hung over the survivors. The laughter of children, the songs of birds, and the warmth of the sun were gone, replaced by silence, sorrow, and fear that would linger long after the flames died down. The survivors stumbled through the forest, their bodies weak, their spirits heavier than ever. Each step was a battle against hunger and exhaustion. Some carried what little food they could find. Others had nothing at all. The children's cries echoed through the trees, small voices breaking in despair. Nights were the worst. The darkness pressed in from all sides, and the wind whispered threats among the branches. Every rustle, every crack of a twig seemed like an approaching danger. Mothers clutched their children tightly, whispering promises they could not be sure to keep. Fathers trudged ahead, silent and haunted, carrying the weight of helplessness. Days passed slowly. Rivers ran dry in the heat and food grew scarcer with each step. Some fell behind, unable to continue, and were left in the shadow of fear. The survivors' faces grew hollow, eyes sunken, voices hushed. Hunger gnawed at their bodies. Fear gnawed at their minds. Occasionally, the distant sound of gunfire or shouting reached them. It reminded them that the world they had known, their homes, their laughter, their sunlit days, was gone forever. Each night, the firefly's soft glow was a fragile comfort, a fleeting memory of light in a world of darkness. Even the trees seemed to mourn with them. Branches hung low, leaves darkened, and the wind carried a sorrowful song. Every step forward was both hope and torment. Hope to survive, torment of what had been lost and what might never be regained. The forest no longer felt like a refuge. Every rustle of leaves, every snapping branch made the survivors flinch. Shadows moved in strange ways at night, and even the moon seemed cold and distant. Hunger had hollowed their stomachs, but fear had hollowed their hearts. Families were torn apart. Some tried to carry too much and could not keep up. Others fell asleep in the shadows and never woke. Mothers wept quietly for the children they could no longer protect. Fathers' hands shook as they tried to hold back tears, knowing there was nothing they could do. Adil walked beside his mother, barely able to lift his legs. His small mouth murmured questions he could not yet understand. "Why is the sun gone, Mother? Why are the birds silent?" His mother could only hug him tighter, whispering, "We must keep moving. We must survive." At times they encountered strangers, other survivors, wandering souls with hollow eyes and haunted faces. Some were friendly, offering a crumb of bread or a shared glance of solidarity. Others had been driven mad by hunger and fear, attacking anything in their path. Trust became a dangerous gamble, and hope a fragile thread that could snap at any moment. The nights grew colder. The survivors huddled together, sharing the little warmth they had. Each breath was visible in the frigid air, a reminder of life still clinging to them. But the cold was not the worst enemy, loss was. Every fallen friend, every abandoned child, every burned home left an emptiness that no warmth could fill. Sometimes Adil whispered the names of people he had known. Each name was a dagger to his heart, a reminder that the world they had loved no longer existed. The village, once golden and filled with laughter, had vanished into a memory, replaced by an unending march through darkness, fear, and sorrow. The forest ended, and the survivors found themselves on barren, burned lands. Villages lay in ruins, smoke still rising from smoldering roofs. The ground was scorched, fields empty, and the air heavy with the stench of death and fire. Hunger gnawed at them relentlessly. Children cried for food that did not exist. Adults searched desperately for anything edible, roots, leaves, scraps, but often found nothing. Each day became a struggle to carry the weak and the sick, to keep moving despite the unbearable weight of despair. The war followed them everywhere. They could hear distant explosions, the rumble of cannons, and the screams of those who could not escape. Every shadow seemed like an enemy. Every stranger could be a threat. Fear had become a constant companion, a shadow that clung to their every step. Adil's mother sometimes stopped, pressing him close, tears streaming down her face. She whispered stories of the old days, of sunny mornings and laughter, but the words felt empty in the world that had become dark and cruel. Some nights when the fire could be made, they sat in silence, watching flames dance. Every flicker reminded them of homes lost, friends lost, lives lost. The children, too young to fully understand, clutched their parents, shivering not from the cold, but from the heavy weight of sorrow and fear. Even when they thought they might find shelter, they discovered that nothing was safe. Strangers with hollow eyes and desperate hearts roamed the lands, and danger could strike without warning. Each step forward was a gamble between survival and death, and hope felt like a cruel illusion. Adil looked up at the gray sky and whispered, "Will the sun ever come back, Mother?" She had no answer, only a tight hug and a silent prayer that they might somehow survive another night. Days turned into weeks. The survivors' bodies were thin, their skin pale and their eyes hollow. Hunger was no longer a pang, it was a constant gnawing pain. Every morsel of food became a treasure, every drop of water a miracle. They stumbled upon other villages, once full of life, now nothing but ashes and silence. Smoke still curled from charred rooftops. and the cries of the lost seemed to linger in the empty streets. There were no children laughing, no elders telling stories, no warm fires. Only death had remained. Adil's little legs grew weaker with each step. His mother carried him part of the way. Then another survivor helped, when she could no longer bear the weight. Faces they had known were gone, replaced by strangers who wandered like ghosts, haunted by the same fear. Some tried to steal what little others had. Trust was dangerous. Sharing food could mean losing life. Families were torn apart, not always by soldiers or fire, but by desperation, by hunger, by the unbearable weight of survival. Nights were endless. The wind howled through the trees like the cries of the dead. Cold seeped into bones, but it was grief that burned the most. Mothers whispered prayers to absent gods. Fathers muttered curses at the sky, and children slept with nightmares pressed against their hearts. Adil sometimes woke screaming, haunted by faces he could no longer name, by voices that would never call him again. Each day was a journey through a world stripped of joy, of warmth, of sun. Every step forward was shadowed by the memory of what had been lost, and the fear of what more could be taken. Even hope itself felt like a ghost. It flickered sometimes in the distance, a patch of green in a barren field, a river running faintly, but it was never enough to erase the darkness. And yet they walked because to stop was to die, and to die alone in silence was the cruelest fate of all. The final days were the hardest. The survivors were no longer just tired, they were broken, each step a battle against a body that had almost given up. The world around them had become a gray wasteland. The forests they had run through were gone, replaced by charred earth and empty skies. Adil walked beside his mother, holding her hand tightly. Every now and then he looked up at her face, searching for a smile, for any sign of safety. But her eyes were heavy with sorrow, her lips trembling, and yet she kept moving. She whispered softly, "We are almost there. Keep going, my son." They came upon a small stream, water trickling faintly through stones. It was the first water they had seen in days. Children drank quickly. Mothers bathed their faces, and for a brief moment relief replaced despair. But it was fleeting. The wind carried distant cries again, reminders that the nightmare was not over. Some did not make it. They collapsed along the path, too weak, too hungry, too full of fear. Their names were whispered in grief by those who continued walking. The survivors learned that loss would follow them no matter how far they ran. Every shadow reminded them of someone gone, every silence of what had been stolen from their lives. Yet even in this world of ruin and grief, a faint light remained. It was not the golden sun of the days before the war, nor the laughter of children, but a fragile human spirit, stubborn and enduring. Families leaned on each other. Strangers shared warmth, and Adil, though exhausted and scared, still held his mother's hand, believing in a tomorrow that was uncertain but possible. As the sun set on the horizon, painting the sky with muted colors, the survivors stopped for a moment. They were battered, their clothes torn, their hearts heavy, but they were alive. And sometimes survival itself was the most profound victory. Adil whispered softly, "Will the sun come back tomorrow, Mother?" She smiled faintly, tears shining in her eyes, and said, "Perhaps, my son, perhaps." And with that fragile hope, they continued walking into the uncertain night, carrying grief, memory, and the faint glimmer of tomorrow within their hearts.